And now we're going to hear a couple of bills today. Representative Kraft is going to make his way to the table. And first on the agenda is House File 2986. And we will let Representative Kraft get himself settled. Welcome to committee. And Representative Kraft, did you want to move your bill?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would move House File 2986 be laid over for possible inclusion.
Great. And Representative Kraft, I believe you have the DE6.
I do. I'd move the
get to-
DE6
Great.
to put the bill in the shape that I would like it considered.
Wonderful. All those in favor of the DE6, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. So with that, Representative Kraft, go ahead and tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. So I'm excited to be here to present a couple bills today that all tie into the really important focus of affordability. The first one is on a grid efficiency perspective, and the next one will be about how to bring some solar energy affordability to individual customers. So this bill is based on a few key concepts, virtual power plants. The key concepts are, first, for utilities, reducing peak usage can save a lot of money. Peaks are when utilities typically pay the most for energy. Second key concept is that an electron is an electron. What I mean by that is that when a utility needs power, it makes no difference whether they generate that power from a power plant or by getting it from customers, maybe from batteries, or by having customers reduce or shift their usage to another time. Third point is there's more and more devices used by people and businesses that can supply the grid energy. So think solar panels, batteries, and EVs, or are flexible in when they use energy. Think heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, smart thermostats, some appliances, and EVs and batteries again. And these class of devices I'm going to call distributed energy resources. So again, reducing utility peaks saves money, electron is an electron, and there's a lot of devices out there that can provide distributed energy resources. So the idea of this bill of virtual power plants is for an entity, which we'll call an aggregator, to connect to many of these distributed energy resources and through software make them taken together behave like a peaker power plant. So like, what does that mean? So utility may say, look, I need 1 megawatt of power for an hour later today. Goes to the aggregator says, okay, I can send you 1 megawatt of power. I'm going to do that from 5,000 customer batteries and EVs, or I'm going to reduce energy usage by 1 megawatt for that next hour by doing a mix of 10,000 customer actions like pausing EV charging or temporarily turning down thermostats or preheating water tanks so they won't be needed during that time. Many utilities have been doing simplified versions of this for a long time with demand response programs for businesses or programs for consumers that allow them to control a device, typically like an HVAC unit, for short periods of time. Sometimes for larger loads, the demand response is even someone calling someone at a large site and saying, hey, can you turn down your thermostat, or can you pause this machine for a bit? The difference with virtual power plants is their scale and the fact that the aggregation is meant to have utilities be able to interact with them as they do power plants. Because of where these distributed energy resources are located, this bill is really focused at the distribution part of the grid. I want to review a few slides from Commerce's presentation on Thursday to show why this is so important and why it has such a potential to save ratepayers money. And now let's see if I can do this. Yes. All right, don't I get applause? All right.
Tech guy.
All right. So this is one of the slides that Commissioner Wyckoff presented. It shows that if you look at the various trends, that generation is still quite a significant expense, but look at what's happening with distribution. Distribution costs are growing substantially. Sorry. And this is more detail. This is from 29 to 24, the change in the annual U.S. Electric IOU public utility expenditures. So you see the change, generation is going down, transmission costs are going up, but the largest part going up is distribution. And here's one of the, I pointed this out on Thursday, but this shows the correlation between more load growth, and the potential to lower retail prices. And the reason that this is that if you think about it, if you have a set of wires, right, a set of facility, and you can put more load on it without building other stuff, then it drives rates down. Virtual power plants are about using the grid we have more efficiently. So that's what this has so much potential. And this last slide was talking about how we can meet the need. We have a growing need on the grid for more power. And how do we meet that grid? Well, renewables and storage are fast to deploy. Other options out there take quite a bit of time. But if you look on the right here, what's the fastest way we can do things that can address the load and lower costs? Energy efficiency, you see demand response, and virtual power plants. Okay? So that's why I think what we're talking about here is so important. And specifically, according to a Department of Energy 2025 report, virtual power plants are solutions that can be deployed at scale in a short time frame to maximize the use and value of existing grid infrastructure, minimize costs to ratepayers, and ensure a resilient, reliable, and secure grid. Estimates are that virtual power plants could provide 10 to 20% of peak load annually by 2030, which would save $10 to $20 billion in annual grid costs across the country. So that's the potential here. So on to the bill. At a high level, what the bill does is it says that public utilities in Minnesota must reduce their system peak, the highest cost time of the day for them, must reduce their system peak with a virtual power plant program and reduce it by 5% by the end of 2028 and 10% by the end of 2032. They must do this by getting bids in a request for proposal process run by an independent third party. This is to make sure that all aggregators, including utilities if they so wish, have the information they need to bid and that all are on an equal footing. So get it out and let the market pick the best. Virtual power plant plans must be built into a public utilities integrated resource plan filing, so we're trying to merge into existing systems. And we include, I'll call a savings clause in there, like we did in the 2040 law that said the PUC can relax the requirements if they are shown to not be technically or financially feasible. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd like to, I got some testifiers.
Looks like there's several. Oh, I forgot to turn on my microphone. Yeah, there's several on the list. First, we have Sidney Lieb, Assistant Commissioner from the Minnesota Department of Commerce. Please make your way to the table. Welcome to committee. Go ahead and introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
You're good. It's live.
It's live.
There you go.
Thank you, Chair Acom and members of the committee. Co-chairs Acom and Wazinski, members of the committee, my name's Assistant Commissioner Sidney Lieb, and I'm here to testify on HF 2986 on behalf of the Department of Commerce. Virtual power plants, or VPPs, aggregate and manage distributed generation, storage, and demand response so that these distributed resources function like a grid-scale generation resource. VPPs are an important tool that can rapidly improve the capacity constraints on our grid by making use of new and existing distributed generation, storage, and demand response. These resources can be deployed when energy system needs are at their peak and can reduce energy costs by avoiding expensive peak resources or market purchases when demand is high across the region, which significantly drives energy spot prices. The value of resources that can mitigate energy demand at system peak has become even more important since MISO, which is the interregional market that most of the state participates in, recently implemented market reforms to align market price signals with demand. The most recent MISO auction saw peak demand prices over $600 per megawatt day, and for context, prices are typically below 100 megawatt during non-peak times. With the legislation passed last year to support data center development and the announcement this morning, Minnesota is likely to see electric load growth at least partially driven by data center development in the state, as well as other demand growth from other economic development opportunities. One challenge in meeting the energy demand of these large customers will be the ability to bring on generation resources online at pace with the data center development and demand growth. We anticipate that supply chain constraints in grid-scale generators, continued economic dislocation from federal policies such as tariffs, and general federal hostility to wind and solar, the type of generation that can be built most quickly, and other federal actions, as well as delays in the MISO interconnection queue, may create challenges in increasing generation to meet the growing demand. The Department of Commerce supports an all-of-the-above approach to achieving the state's 0 by 40 clean electricity requirement, and this includes virtual power plants. Virtual power plants can provide low-cost, clean, firm power by utilizing existing generation, storage, and demand response resources on the distribution system located in and near large load and population centers. This evades the need for transmission investments, and for this reason, VPPs can be an important source of low-cost energy. This bill addresses traditional utility incentive structures that underinvest historically in demand response. Vertically integrated utilities are incentivized to build transmission and generation infrastructure and prefer these investments over alternative investments such as demand response and virtual power plants that can avoid more capital and costly capital investments. Given the misalignment of incentives that favor large investments over distributed system investments and non-wires alternatives, utilities will underinvest and have historically underinvested in VPPs and DR without a policy signal to make these investments more appropriate. This bill would encourage further development of the virtual power plant ecosystem in Minnesota to further benefit us all through lower energy bills and increased reliability and resilience. Virtual power plants can leverage existing utility system investments in the distribution grid and improve grid utilization to make these investments more cost-effective for customers. The proposed approach sets a standard and then put out an RFP to see how the system can most effectively secure these resources needed in line with existing utility and regulatory oversight procedures. This legislation stipulates that this process be run through a neutral third party so as to reassure ratepayers that the most cost-effective pathway to meet this capacity need are procured. This is part of the consumer protection that we see as essential for ratepayers. In addition to this essential consumer protection, we also note that the bill has additional consumer protection provisions in the legislation. The first is that the department provides appropriate and reasonable consumer protections and standards for entry into a virtual power plant program, included but not limited to requirements for standard contract terms and disclosure forms, payment terms, and warranties. In addition, the provision in the VPP program requirements spell out key features that must be attended to with VPPs, including how often a VPP can be dispatched, when and over what duration the notice requirements and opt-out process will occur, and as well as how compensation rates for participants will be determined. The department and me are available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lieb. Next on the list is Patty O'Keefe, Regional Director for Midwest Vote Solar. Welcome to committee. It's wonderful to see you.
Yeah.
Please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Acom, and thank you to, Chairs Acom and Swedinsky. My name is Patty O'Keefe. I am the Midwest Regional Director with Vote Solar. I want to thank Representative Kraft for advancing this bill in a broader conversation on virtual power plants. Virtual power plants, or VPPs for short, are a really exciting innovation in energy that are already making a lot of strides across the country and making energy more affordable and the grid more reliable. And they are also a bit wonky, and so you did a great job with breaking it down. I'm going to try and break it down even a bit more So if you can imagine a neighborhood where people have solar panels on their roofs, or an EV charger in their garage, or a smart thermostat in their home, and these people voluntarily decide to be part of a network that brings all of those devices together, that network uses software to, bring all of the power of those technologies together and shift the energy to where it needs to go on the grid to meet demand. The entity that is actually running the software and like coordinating where all of these different resources go is called an aggregator. So hence the name. You can think of VPPs like a power plant, but made up of small devices, that are brought together. And for being part of a network as a customer, you get compensated for the value that your home energy system brings to the grid. If that still feels a little complicated, think of virtual power plants like an orchestra. In this scenario, the instruments are the rooftop solar, the batteries, the smart thermostats. The conductor is the aggregator in the center, calling on different instruments at different times, helping them all work together to create a beautiful supply of musical energy to your ears. That was my best shot at a... VPPs are especially helpful during times of peak demand when people are using the most energy. So for example, on a hot summer day when people get home from work and everyone starts running their air conditioners, there may not be enough supply of energy on the system to meet the demand. And in those cases, we often will turn on our gas peaker plants whose purpose has been to fill those gaps and to make sure we still have reliable power on those high demand days. While peaker plants play an important role in system reliability, they also do come at a cost. They're between 35 and 45% less efficient than a regular gas plant, which means they burn a lot more fuel, but between 60 and 70% more fuel as a regular gas plant to produce the same amount of electricity. This makes them amongst the most expensive sources of electricity on the system, oftentimes costing 2 to 4 times more per megawatt hour than renewables or more efficient gas plants. So with rising load growth, increasing extreme weather, and an affordability crisis, we need all the tools in our toolbox. And VPPs are a practical market-based tool to make use of existing resources to reduce waste on the system and save ratepayers money. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Keefe. And instead of tools in the toolbox, isn't it instruments in the orchestra?
Instruments in the orchestra, yeah. I'll stay more committed to that.
All right,
metaphor.
next, thank you. Next on the list, we have Bobby King, State Policy Director for Solar United Neighbors. Welcome to committee, Mr. King. Please go ahead and introduce yourself for committee, and go ahead.
Thank you, Co-Chair Akam. My name is Bobby King. I'm the Minnesota State Director for Solar United Neighbors. Just wanted to add a few points to what's already been well said. We've found that with solar and battery policy, solar and batteries policy has not really kept up with what technology makes possible, what the industry can deliver, and what consumers want. So this bill takes a big step in rectifying some of that. And for me, one of the most exciting things about VPPs is the only thing to keep them from working in Minnesota is the right policy framework. And with that policy framework that's proposed in this bill, we can quickly realize savings for all ratepayers. It's estimated that 35% of all solar installations are going to include batteries in the future. And one thing that VPPs do is they take that private investment that's not being utilized to its full potential, and they figure out a way that not only does that battery owner benefit and get a financial incentive, but all ratepayers can get a benefit through this VPP system. We've got a financial analyst at Sun that took a look at the best research out there on potential VPP savings and applied it to Xcel Energy territory. And I submitted some longer comments that are in your packet, I hope, and online. But by that estimate, using Minnesota-specific situation, we estimate if, in 2030, if we meet 10% of our peak demand with VPPs, the savings will be 63.5 million, 63.5 million. That'd be about $50 a customer. And of course, folks that are enrolled in the VPP program will save even more. So there's a lot of potential here that we can unlock with this approach, and we look forward to working with this as it advances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Next, we have on the list Jessica Fishman with Renewable Energy, as the Renewable Energy Director with Kite Rocket. Welcome to committee. Please go ahead and introduce yourself and proceed.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Jessica Fishman. I've been working in Electrotech for the past 15 plus years. As part of that experience, I was able to launch one of the first VPP solutions. First, I want to reiterate really how cool virtual power plants are for grid modernization and expansion. Our energy infrastructure has stayed nearly the same for a century. We've focused on, and VPPs are a massive leap forward. Typically, we have energy produced at one central location and then transmitted out to where it's consumed. What VPPs do is they move production, consumption, and storage to the same location, and then are aggregating and coordinating all these energy resources that are distributed so that they can operate as one large power plant. They transform our grid into an interconnected distributed network that is really proactive. As already mentioned, they can include batteries, but they can also include a number of other resources. EVs, water heaters, thermostats. They not only supply or store extra energy, but also reduce demand. It almost feels like sci-fi, but it's not. VPPs have already been deployed in Massachusetts, California, Utah, Puerto Rico, North and South Carolina. They're already providing reductions for ratepayers and cutting costs for utilities. VPPs can act as a cheap peaker plant. When energy demand is going to be high, for instance, it's a hot day, during the morning, they can charge up the batteries and then discharge the batteries when it's much hotter to help power air conditioners. That means there's less stress on transmission and distribution lines, and it can even defer and completely avoid having to build costly T&D upgrades. But VPPs are better than just peaker plants. They're more flexible and they're cheaper. They can improve reliability, they maintain grid frequency, they help with voltage control, they can hedge against pricing volatility, they can reduce congestion on transmission lines, they support energy trading, provide backup power. Using a VPP solely for peak shaving would be like buying a car and only using it to go to the grocery store and not go anywhere else with it. VPPs essentially turn energy appliances into grid resources versus grid strains. According to the Brattle Group, the benefits of a similar program in California significantly outweigh the program's costs, providing a potential net system cost savings of up to $206 million between 2025 and 2028. Thank you for your time and consideration. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. And last on the list, we have Sarah Webby from Mencia. There she is. Welcome to committee, Ms. Webby. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Co-Chair Acom, committee members. My name is Sarah Webby, Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs for Mencia. I'm here today to speak in support of House File 2986, and I want to speak plainly about what this bill has the potential to do for every Minnesotan who pays an electric bill. Minnesota ratepayers are facing compounding cost pressures due to increasing costs for distribution infrastructure. And we've already seen record rate increases across the state. As the Deputy Commissioner of Energy Resources shared in this committee last week, with federal clean energy funding now at risk, independent analysts project that Minnesota energy bills could increase by 10% by as soon as 2029. And that is the trajectory that we're on without intervention. Virtual power plants are a cost intervention. By coordinating customer-sited solar, batteries, EVs, smart thermostats, and water heaters to reduce demand during peak hours, VPPs cut expensive wholesale market purchases and defer infrastructure investments that drive rate increases. They also reduce reliance on costly peakers precisely at the moment when prices are highest. We know that this works because other states have done it. Where VPP programs have been implemented, the results are consistent. Benefit to cost ratios well above 1-to-1, which means that ratepayers receive more in system benefits than the program costs to operate. The dominant driver of those benefits is avoided capacity costs, generation and infrastructure that never gets built because the VPP handled the peak instead. Real-world performance data shows that distributed battery fleets coordinated at scale can deliver the equivalent output of a large generating plant during actual grid stress events, not just in models. On resilience, Minnesota's extreme weather demands a grid that can withstand beyond normal stress. Distributed resources spread across thousands of homes have no single point of failure. That architecture is fundamentally more resilient than dependence on a handful of large centralized plants. This bill provides a strong foundation, but it could go further. The greatest ratepayer benefits will come not from utilities running their own programs, but from robust third-party ownership and aggregation. In this new era of decentralized energy infrastructure, competition will drive down costs, privatize risk, and accelerate enrollment. This bill creates a framework to make use of infrastructure already being installed here today to reduce costs for all ratepayers and strengthen the grid, and I urge you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Webby. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this bill today? Doesn't look like it, so we'll maybe turn to questions from committee members. I actually have one that I don't know if Representative Kraft, you can respond to, or one of the testifiers, but I think it was Ms. Fishman who said that VPPs can be like a cheaper peaker plant. And so I'm wondering, given that this is policy that has been deployed in other states, do we have any kind of estimate as to how much cheaper? I know it may be variable, it may be, are there any, just high-level estimates about how much cheaper?
Madam Chair, I don't know relative to a specific peaker plant. I don't know if one of the testifiers, if you do come on up, I will say that in the analysis of what this can save from peak costs is that if we could do 10 to 20% of peak load annually, it's $10 to $20 billion around the country, and that's primarily coming from those. But
Yeah.
of the specific, like peaker versus not, I don't have that.
Mr. King, I see you raising your hand. Go ahead and make your way to the table, please. And again, introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you. Sorry. Bobby King, the State Director for Solar United Neighbors. In the information I provided to the committee, we did an analysis, and it's on a fact sheet. It's the last page. So if you go to the bottom, there's a graph there that shows the cost of running a VPP versus the benefits versus the cost of running a peaker costs in XL territory versus the benefits. And that's how we came up with the 65 million savings. And that, do folks have that?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it's,
No, there's a lot of stuff that was submitted, so.
yeah, it's the
Thank
very
you.
last page of
Yeah,
what
okay.
what I submitted. So this comes from the Brattle Group's large report applied specifically to Minnesota. So that's not a specific peaker, but peakers in general versus VPPs and the numbers for Minnesota
Great,
in XL territory.
thank you, appreciate that. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Kraft, for bringing this forward. I know we talked about this a little bit this summer, and, I guess I'm kind of curious, what do our IOUs think about this, and how are they implementing? I think I had heard earlier that they're starting to do this now. What government likes to do a lot is mandate these things on the go so we can push it harder and faster so it becomes reality. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing this bill is attempting to do. Technology is getting there, and I think that I've heard that, again, Xcel Energy, for example, is utilizing this now. I'm curious, and maybe Xcel wants to come forward and kind of just give me an idea or us an idea about where are they at now in this program. What concerns me about putting this forward, if this were to pass and it's in law, I know you had some off-ramps that if, look, the PUC can say, look, if this isn't quite ready, we got an off-ramp. But between now and then, before they say if there is an off-ramp, if that's what it comes to be, they have spent gobs and gobs of money to get it to that point to say, this isn't going to work like you think it will right now today. So my question only is this, is that if I wouldn't mind asking Xcel, Madam Chair, if that's all right, to ask that question. I know I'm putting them on the spot. If they want to say, no, Baker, I'm not doing it, I get it, that's fine. But I think this is important conversation to understand. We're driving our biggest providers of energy to a system that has really good technology. I'm not opposed to the technology. I'm not opposed to what this is going to do. But how will it work for the ratepayers, how it naturally can kind of work in the system versus being kind of forced ahead of time? That's where I'm having a lot of heartburn on this, Representative Kraft, is we're pushing it a little quicker than I think that naturally would want to happen best is if it's done at a natural level. So you can answer that, or if we can go right to Xcel, whatever you want to do, Mr. Representative Kraft.
Well, Mr. Pearson, I appreciate you coming to committee. I know you didn't sign up to testify, and so appreciate
Thank you.
your willingness to answer a few questions or provide a little input. And Representative Kraft, did you want to respond to Representative Baker, or?
Madam Chair, I'll let Mr. Pearson
Yeah.
go first, and then I'll have a few comments.
Great.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and just for the record, Jim Pearson with Xcel Energy. I've enjoyed listening to the conversation today, and I think I would make a couple of points. First being, we've been talking with Representative Kraft about the bill for a long time, several months. I mean, that's the one thing we do enjoy about this committee is being able to sort of interact on the details. Representative Baker, to your point, I do agree that our preference would be to have a less prescriptive direction coming from the legislature and allow us the flexibility to go down this path, sort of to get a high direction or a high policy signal from the legislature and let the details get sorted out through regulatory processes. That is the path that we are currently on. The virtual power plant proposal that we have in front of the commission now, we refer to as Capacity Connect. That was born out of an IRP settlement. So from that perspective, the direction and the focus of the conversation, again, to your point, we are very engaged in that and going down the path. I would remind the committee that when we filed that, there was, I think most of you, if not all legislators, got some email about cost concerns with our program. And I know Representative Baker, you and I had a follow-up conversation about some of the email that you had received from constituents who were expressing the cost concerns about our program. I'm happy to get into the details, but that is the point that I guess I'd really like to drive home from today and for the committee, is the details matter. Some of the virtual power plant programs are not cost effective. Some of them may be. It is critical to understand how those calculations are made. And that's what we do when we submit a filing to the commission. We go through that process and prove it out. And so again, I'm just advocating for a conversation that is maybe less prescriptive and allows the utilities to come forward with proposals and work that out in a very public process, which the commission has and which we want to use for that type of detailed conversation.
Mr. Pearson, I certainly appreciate those comments, and I think if I recall from some of the cost concerns that came up in response to Capacity Connect, part of that concern is that the utility is going to be owning all of the resources for that rather than having it on a maybe competitively open market kind of situation. And so maybe a little bit of difference in model, but appreciate that. Representative Baker, did you have a follow-up?
Madam Chair, I wasn't sure if Rep. Kraft wanted to respond to that.
Representative Kraft.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Baker. I really appreciate the thoughtful question, and Mr. Pearson, we have spoken a lot about this, and will continue, right? So that's something that I commit to as part of this. A few things to think about. I think if we were to ask Assistant Commissioner Lee back up here and were to ask her, and maybe we should, about demand response performance, what I've heard over time is that the IOUs have consistently underperformed on where folks would want them from a demand response perspective. So that's the precursor to virtual power plants. So we have an example of maybe not performing to where we would want them to do in terms of, and that can be a cost saving. You talked about, is it going to be gobs of money? What I would say is we're not the first state to do this. This is happening in many other places, and we can build on that. So it's known how to do these things. The Capacity Connect proposal from Xcel, I applaud their creativity in trying to use batteries more within their network. It's different than than the bill that I have here. The Capacity Connect is a front of meter thing versus a back of meter. That means that Xcel would own these, and they would not be used by the customer at all, but it would just be co-located on a customer site, and they would use them to balance out things going on in the grid. The virtual power plants that I'm talking about are quite a different kind of a thing, aggregating the customer side. And lastly, in terms of less prescriptive, I appreciate that. I mean, I have a long background in the tech industry and appreciate the private market. But the IOUs are monopolies. Their incentive structure are set up, just the way they earn money is by building things. And what we've seen over time is they have done less of this kind of thing than we would like them to do that can be effective for customers. So I think it is our responsibility as with a monopoly provider to say, we demand a bit more of you. We're going to have the off-ramps there for you to be able to get off if it turns out not. But we're basing on what other people are doing, and I think we can ask our utilities, given their monopoly status, to step up a bit and save our ratepayers more money.
Just a quick follow-up, Madam Chair, thanks. And I appreciate both of you responding to that. Just inquisitive question that I have, because again, technology is coming. I hope that someday in Minnesota we'll also have more carbon-free baseload, which is nuclear, someday on our grid, that we can use that also to help our system. But I think what your program is trying to do is to try to not build more things so that we can utilize what's there. I know, talking with our partners that are trying to figure out how do we work through this net metering program, and batteries now are becoming a huge part of that because we want to balance out the load. If we have a perfect system, we know exactly when the load is coming and the demand, and that is the secret sauce. I know that we're trying to get to. I'm just, again, wanting to warn all of us that what starts with the IOUs ends up with the munis and the co-ops, and I'm concerned that down the road, that is going to be something that could be. And again, I'm just sharing that concern because it's all about, we all want to make sure that we utilize our current grid system more efficiently so we don't have to build more plants. But I just wanted to put that out there because, again, this has got maybe future potential, but I just hate pushing industry to a point where it's going to end up costing much more money than we're ready to do a fair rate of return. So I appreciate that indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Baker.
Madam Chair, could I just?
Representative Kraft.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Baker, 2 points. This bill is focused at the IOUs. Because the munis and co-ops have a just different incentive structure, we generally see them taking more advantage of stuff like this. So I don't foresee this going down there because their incentive structure is just different. And the other thing I would say is we are going to need to build a lot more stuff, right? We're going to need to build more transmission. We're going to need to build more, power generating things. With the load growth that we're seeing from data centers, EVs over time are going to dominate that. So I am not we're going to do this and never going to have to build more things. We're going to have to build more things, but we should take advantage of every tool we have in the toolbox. And this is a way we can get more capacity rapidly and lower costs. So,
Thank you. Mr. Pearson, briefly?
Madam Chair, thanks for a final opportunity. We've talked a little bit about incentive structures, and I guess I just wanted to add to that. We take our role as building infrastructure to power the state's economy very seriously. And I believe that from all of, whether you're an investor-owned utility, a co-op, a municipality. And so the incentives there are really about powering the state's economy safely, reliably, and affordable. Representative Kraft talked about our defined service territories. As utilities in Minnesota, we all have them. The only way I can grow is by doing a good job and incenting customers to locate within our territory. I can't expand geographically, but I can be affordable, reliable, sustainable, et cetera. So we take those charges to heart. They mean a lot in terms of how we grow. And in this environment, now I started with Xcel in 2011. I've never worked for the company where we've been in a growth environment, where we've had significant load growth around the corner. That is a key piece to trying to maintain some level of affordability, because if we have more kilowatt hours to divide our costs across, it helps all of our customers in lowering the upward pressure on rates that is coming through the investments that we're making. So I would love the opportunity to continue to talk about that, and I just want to put a plug in for our incentives really are about powering the state's economy in that manner. So I appreciate the additional time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Next on the list, we have Representative Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Kraft, for bringing this forward. As we were talking about, technology and should we be pushing our monopolies to be adopting certain technologies, it made me actually remember, back in 1994, we were talking about nuclear and Prairie Island and storing casks of nuclear waste and all of that. And as a part of that negotiation, we had the renewable development account that was developed. We talked, and then there was the decisions around nuclear. But another key piece to that was that there was a requirement for 100 megawatts of wind to be built in Minnesota. So we required that of Xcel. I don't know how they felt about it at the time, but as a result of that, they built it, and then they realized it was cost effective. And so I think it behooves us to learn from that example that, especially when we have a regulatory compact, and these are regulated monopolies, we have a duty to continue to push the envelope and innovate so that we can keep costs down. Now, wind power is 25% of our load in Minnesota. And so we've seen fantastic success. And I think, we're not guinea pigs when it comes to VPPs. And so I think we can be pretty self-assured that we're not going to, suddenly see costs explode because of this. We should actually see the opposite. And so, especially given the regulatory compact and with monopoly utilities, and we're doing this in a public process, I do want to call out, Mr. Pearson had said, maybe we should be doing this through the PUC in a public process there. Well, this is a public process. This is a public meeting. We've got elected officials here. The PUC is not elected. I think this is the most public process that we could have in order to set up a VPP policy. And so I just want to thank Representative Kraft for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
And last question to Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just kind of more of a couple of comments. I appreciate this conversation. It's my understanding that Governor Newsom vetoed a VPP bill in 2025 in California with concerns on it. And here we go again, right? So we already have a bill that calls for carbon-free power by 2040. It's a mandate. And we're saying, go out and figure it out, utilities, but we're going to tell you exactly how to get there as a legislative body. Rather than allowing markets to work, like we were told that this is a market-based solution, well, then why do we need to mandate it? Thank you.
Final question to Representative Sexton, sorry.
Actually, I have two, if you don't mind, ma'am.
Yes, of course.
First of all, I was wondering if MISO was invited, because we talked about electrons go with the path of least resistance, and they're crossing borders all the time, and we're part of a bigger MISO network, which this bill and this decision could significantly impact. So I think we're incomplete in our testimony without a MISO perspective on what we do with the VPP. Second point, I read some very interesting articles back around 2010 on VPPs using automobile batteries. It was written by the Northwest National Lab. Then this summer, I had the opportunity to go out there, take some classes, and I said, hey, it's been 25 years, 26 or 16 years, excuse me. What happened with that? They said, well, we were going to build this whole network of you plug in your car when you get home from work, and then you go to work and you plug in your car and you buy and sell all day long. You could take your battery down to 80%. You could take it only down to 50%, whatever you wanted to program in your car. And then they came back and said, when we actually tested it, which is part of a VPP, it burned out the batteries much faster than they ever imagined. So it increased the cost significantly of replacing the car and the car battery. So they pretty much dropped that portion of it, which battery parts or batteries are a significant portion of a VPP to minimize your peak load. So just wanted to bring that out, that even the people who research this all the time are kind of backing off from the batteries.
And we're going to maybe give Representative Kraft a moment to respond, but I will say part of it is when you use the battery and also when you charge the battery. So it can be variable about both. Representative Kraft.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Is this the final comments on the bill?
Yeah, I don't see any other questions. So
great.
yeah, go ahead. You can respond to
Yeah,
Representative Sexton.
thank you.
and-
So, this bill is targeted at the distribution side of the grid, not the wholesale side of the grid, which is why I didn't spend as much time with MISO, but I'm happy to reach out with you if you'd like to get a perspective on that. And the bill isn't saying what kind of technology needs to be used for VPPs. Some of the most successful ones that I've seen in many other places are using batteries. Sometimes there's some really cool business models that are out there where where an aggregator will put a battery on a customer site and say, hey, you can use it and we can use it. And they're very successful. So I'll share those with you. Thank you for this really excellent conversation, committee members. The question is, what I'm excited about here is this targets the most costly part of a utility's usage. It focused on the area of the grid where costs are growing fastest. And it allows us to go after in places that are historically underinvested because public utility, and I really appreciate that Xcel is trying to do their best, but they are just incented to make money for their shareholders, which is about building things, and this is not that. So that is why that I think a mandate here of saying, do a bit of this makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Kraft. And with that, the bill is laid over.